Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast with your host, Aaron Christie David. Each episode, we ask an expert to share their key insights for aspiring investors to make confident property choices.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast, all about helping you make better property choices. I'm Aaron Christie David, founder of Atelier Wealth, a mortgage broking business specialising in helping property investors. Join us each week as we speak to leading experts in their field to ask them the three most commonly questions that investors ask us. These experts live and breathe property investing, and I don't think it gets much bigger and better than having someone like Chris Gray in the studio with us. G'day, Chris.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, mate. Thanks very much for joining us. Just want to make a note that please note that our discussions are general in nature and don't constitute financial advice. So we don't know your current financial situation. So sit back, listen to Chris because he has got plenty of wisdom to impart as well. Chris, you've been the face of Sky Business News for close to 10 years. Mate, you're talking all things property. You lived and breathed it for so long, mate. And it comes out in your book, The Effortless Empire, the time poor professionals guide to building wealth from property, mate. We can share the link to people to get that access to the book as well, mate. What we really want to do is cover off on your own journey. Chris, you've been really open and honest about your journey as a property investor. So I hope that you can share some of your wisdom from your own journey as well and talk through what you look at when you're looking at properties as well on behalf of your clients as a buyer's agent, mate. So hand over to yourself and give us a quick spiel about your journey to date and a little bit about yourself, mate.
Yeah, and you talk about the long journeys, and I actually kind of forget how old I am now. I've got to kind of work it out. So I started investing at about 22, bought my first property in the UK, and now I think I'm 48 from memory. Yeah, 48.
You're doing very well for a 48-year-old, mate.
It's been quite a few years. But look, I've always been a contrarian and done the opposite thing. So 22, I earned £10,000, which wasn't a lot of money. It's like $20,000.
Yeah.
And in the UK, you could borrow 3 times your income. So you could borrow 30,000. And I came from a pretty well-off family. Like my dad was a heart physician, and so I lived in a nice house. And I looked what I could afford with 30,000, and it was the crappiest property in the worst end of town, like absolute rubbish. And I thought, yeah, this isn't me. And so I went shopping on a kind of for champagne on a beer budget, and I found this amazing place for 100,000, and it was by all the wine bars in a place called St Albans in the UK. And if you got drunk, fell out of the wine bar and rolled down the street, you'd end up at this property. So it's the perfect property for me. And I basically just set myself a goal, and I said, this is what I want. And the bottom line, long story short, was I managed to borrow 7 times my income, and I had a 10 grand deposit, so I paid 80 grand for this property that was worth 100. But because I was a first home buyer and I wasn't involved in a chain, I managed to get the property because I could settle really, really quick. But even though my mortgage was more than my wages even before tax, let alone after tax, if I rented 2 rooms out and the rents were around 12% in those days, I could live for free.
Wow.
And so my skill is seeing the simple maths. Buy a 1-bedroom studio or a 1-bedroom unit and you'll be mortgaged for the rest of your life. You can't afford to go out. Supersize it, borrow something 7 times your income and you live for free. And you get 2 years' salary overnight because you've got a good deal. And that was the catalyst that I've run with for the last 20 years, just thinking differently.
So it's a bit like fortune favours the bold a little bit. You could kind of have a safe path, which was to buy something you could afford. You chose to go somewhere with a bit of a stretch target and go, that's a bit ambitious, but it kind of paid off for yourself as well.
And that's what I've done for the whole of my life, because one thing they say about having a big mortgage is it's forced savings.
Mm-hmm.
So people will only do things for pain. Like they quite often they wouldn't do it for pleasure. So you'll never save 100 grand, or most people won't, because it's the pleasure. You're always going to spend it before you get it.
Yeah.
And so when you've got a mortgage, you've got no choice. So I've been mortgaged to the hilt for the whole of my life. Hence the haircut. I've got no hair because of all the stress. But it's forced me to save, and I'll do whatever I've got to do, obviously legally, of course, to make sure I pay those mortgages. And because I kept building a bigger and bigger portfolio, I've just had massive savings because I've been forced to earn an income to pay for that difference between the rent and the mortgage.
Excellent. So gun to your head, you got to make it work.
Yeah, I've got no choice.
Yeah,
my debt now is $12 million. I never thought that was that big, but I caught up with the broker that gave me that loan like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
He said, that is the biggest loan I've ever done in my life. People don't get $12 million mortgages. And I thought that was fairly normal type thing.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of crept up there. So it crept up from, say, £70,000. That's probably a 150, 200 grand mortgage. And now it's 12 million. And it's just step by step. So I haven't had a massive jump. I haven't made a massive windfall. It's just, what do they say? The way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Correct, mate.
Exactly the same thing.
Which is almost one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, I look at the ATO stats around property investors and who gets past, there's the thresholds, one property, 70% of investors get stuck at one property, 6% at 3 properties, and then less than 1% of investors will get past 6 investment properties. And you see a lot of books at 10 properties in 10 years, for example. Some investors have aspirations to build a big portfolio, but very few will actually make that leap to becoming serial property investors, right, from your journey as well. So that's why I wanted to kind of pick your brain and say, how do you get past that threshold? Like what does it take as an investor to really start to think big and then, I guess, grow their portfolio as well?
Sure. So I think it's pushing through a pain barrier, just like you might take up running for something. Say you go and run a kilometre, and most people can do it, run, walk.
Yeah.
Then to try and get to maybe 5Ks, and I'm not a runner, so I don't know what these numbers are, but I've never run that far because I can't get through the pain barrier. And you've just got to push beyond belief, and then it suddenly gets easier, and then it gets harder. Like climbing a mountain, like all these hurdles. So the biggest thing for me is I'm naturally lazy. Yeah. Now, no one ever believes this because they say you're a high performer, you've obviously made a lot of money.
You're probably being gentle on yourself there, but yeah.
But I am. And so I never wanted to work for a living. And so even in my early days as an accountant, and I used to work a 40-hour-a-week job, and then I used to travel up to central London every night and study accounting in college 45 minutes a week, and then have to study at the weekend.
Yeah.
So I was almost doing like a 70 or 80-hour job with my study. But when I bought that first property and I made 2 years' salary overnight, I thought this is a no-brainer. I've made 2 years' salary for doing nothing. And I repeated it the same year and did a joint venture with my dad, and we bought another property that was worth 100,000 for 80,000. And I thought, this is where the money is. It's not from working hard.
Mm.
And I had a mate that was studying accounting as well, and his dad was a business owner. And he said, I don't know why, son, you're wasting your time studying accounting, because I can pay people to do that.
Mm.
And I thought my friend's dad was a bogan for saying that, because my dad was a doctor and academic, and say, yeah, okay, you're not a doctor, Chris, but studying accounting, second best thing. But it's very true what the guy said is it's not the accountant that makes the money, it's the person that employs the accountant or uses the accountant's knowledge to then make the decisions.
It's almost like you lived and breathed rich dad, poor dad in your own life, mate.
Yeah. But I didn't realise this for maybe until I was 30.
Right.
So it's probably 7 or 8 years later I realised that my friend's dad was actually pretty intelligent, even though he was still a bit of a bogan type thing. And so going back to the original question, I think for most people to buy 1 or 2 properties, then that's reasonably easy.
Yeah.
But it is a big pain barrier because it's really then treating it like a business rather than as a hobby. And you've got to take things more seriously. There's more money involved. You've then got to hire better accountants, mortgage brokers, people like that.
Yeah.
And it's upgrading that professional team you've got all the time to find people that will say yes. And so another thing I learned probably at 31, I spent maybe 15 grand doing a property course. And where I couldn't borrow any more money, so I had 6 properties in Australia and the bank said, no, you can't borrow any more money. To me, then I gave up. But I then went on one of these preview nights and then spent all this money on a seminar. And the seminar presenters were saying, there is no rules. Go and speak to 100 brokers, go and speak to 100 banks. If there's a will, there's a way.
Love it.
And because I was deep in debt, so if you're doing it because you want to make more money, most people won't go through that pain. But if you've got no choice that you have to get refinanced, you'll go through it. And I've even done it with Lewis, my business partner, the last couple of years. We saw all this pain coming through for investors like me that were trying to get almost low-doc loans, or the serviceability was suddenly twice as bad. We started going around the Peppers and the Rams and the BOQs, all those second-tier lenders, to say, we want to create a loan for investors like us. So we're not a bus driver trying to buy a $2 million penthouse in the Gold Coast that's going to be worth $1 million overnight. We're buying the Bondi beaches that are $1 million, that it's local affordability, it's stood there for 50 years, people can afford it, we're sophisticated investors that are educated, got good accountants, we're happy to take the risk. We're happy to pay a premium,
Yep.
but we just want the money.
So on that very point then, so how are you assessing, because in your buyer's agency, put that hat on for a minute, how are you looking at so many different properties and assessing that's investment worthy versus I'm going to set this one out, for example?
Yeah, so we know straight away. So a lot of people think it's a grey area, but we've seen thousands of them. We bought hundreds and hundreds. So I've got most of my knowledge from doing stuff like Sky News.
Okay.
So if I wanted to learn off someone, just like you're doing a podcast,
Yeah.
you invite them on TV. And so I could get the heads of the research companies, so like Residex, RP Data, CoreLogic, Australian Property Managers, all those guys, the heads of some of the banks, the economists, the valuers, and I just learned from those guys. And so part of the reason Sky got me on was a normal journalist is they're good at presenting a show in a professional manner.
Yep.
I've got no idea. But because I know property, I can potentially ask a more meaningful question because I'm asking you a genuine question for me. Whereas the journalist isn't a property expert and that's what they do. So I learned from the bank valuers and from the credit teams in the bank what they like and what they dislike.
Yeah.
And the classic things is they hate multi-high-rise. They hate stuff that's got retail commercial around it.
Yeah.
They hate big strata fees. They hate brand new that suddenly could get devalued.
Yeah.
And they love second-hand. They love where the average Australian lives. They love the good suburbs, the blue chip ones versus the other ones. And so I just picked that. They want double-sized bedrooms. They want to know that there's a reasonable space in there. So I've just picked all my criteria for investing around those guys.
Excellent, mate. Thanks very much. That's great insights. And I think, yeah, your experience from Sky News says that you can pick their brains, right? And I don't think there's any shortage of information out there for investors. In fact, I think it's probably overwhelming. And I often say, conflicting advice. You speak to an accountant, you speak to a mortgage broker, you speak to a buyer's agent like yourself. Sometimes there's two sets of family, parents involved, friends, other property investors, and it leads to a lot of confusion for investors. And sometimes that overwhelm leads to them taking no action and sitting it out, and that is to their detriment. So if your advice to a first-time investor, what would it be?
And look, I think you're exactly spot on with that. So a lot of people say, it was easy for you, you're investing in those days.
You got lucky, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, I worked 80 hours a week. Yeah, that was pretty lucky. I mean, I was lucky to be an accountant. Yeah, I studied for 5 years, worked my ass off and all the rest of it. Yeah, I'm lucky. And in those days, there was no information, no books. I don't think Robert Kiyosaki was invented in those days. The Rich Dad Poor Dad, no TV shows, magazines, the rest of it. Getting our first investment property, we had to get a loan from BNP, Banque Nationale de Paris, because there was no UK banks that would lend to investors. Like no one even knew what an investor was. But I think you're right, is now there's so much information that people get confused and they do nothing.
Yeah.
And so my advice to most people is get some information. So you don't want to go in completely cold because there is plenty of sharks out there and everyone's trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
And you can go down the wrong path. But I don't think it takes that long to get it 80% right. You're never going to get it 100% right. So if you're out there trying to get it 100% right, you're a perfectionist, stop it, because you're never going to know them. So I don't know 100% knowledge.
Yeah, great.
And I've done like 10 or 20,000 hours of education.
Yeah.
So you just need to make a start. You need to jump in. What I've learned from my property investing journey is most of the time, if you make a mistake, it's never that bad. But as long as you follow the simple rules. So if you go to the one industry towns, like the mining towns or whatever else.
Tourism hotspots, yeah.
That could halve in value.
Yeah.
But if you stay, say, to a major capital city, so Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and then kind of Adelaide, some of the other places, you don't go in the CBD because there's no limit of supply, and most Aussies don't want to live in the CBD. So you go to that 2 to 5 to 10 Ks out, you buy normal second-hand property, which isn't a professional seller, and go and get an independent valuation before you go and buy. I reckon and you buy around the median price, I reckon it's hard to go too far wrong on that.
Love it.
As long as you've got the cash flow to hold you for a few years as well.
Beautiful. So keep it simple, don't overthink it, but do enough.
So the kind of things I'm buying now are exactly the same as what I bought when I was 22.
Lovely.
And so even though I've got this 10 or 20,000 hours, I haven't changed like that, a tiny bit, but not a lot. And so, yeah, in a way I got lucky. But my thought process in those days is if you buy a good property in a good area, you get good tenants. Good tenants have got good jobs and they pay the rent because they don't want their boss to find out they haven't paid the rent and they've been evicted.
Yeah, great.
Even something as simple as that still works these days.
Beautiful. And that's it. Success leaves clues, doesn't it? So someone like yourself, just tread the path, skin in the game. I love it. Benefit of hindsight for yourself. I mean, you've had quite a number of years as a property investor.
Yeah.
Looking backwards, have you made any mistakes?
So look, I don't generally believe in mistakes because I believe it's learning.
Beautiful.
And if you never took the action to take the mistake, you'd never do anything anyway. But the worst deal I ever did is I did a joint venture with a guy in the UK who's a friend of my flatmates.
Yep.
And because he was a foreigner, we had to buy brand new. And basically, I put up the mortgage, he put up the cash, and we split the profits 50-50.
Yeah.
And we bought a house and land package up in Queensland. And later on, I went to a seminar, and I didn't understand the Queensland suburbs.
Yeah.
I went to a seminar, and just like here, in Sydney, they might joke about buying in Zetland or buying off the plan in an area there's like 10 million of them.
Like a bit like a mascot at the moment. Yeah.
They mentioned the same suburb that I bought in Queensland.
Right.
Now, anyway, we bought this property, it went up 50%.
Yeah.
Sydney at the same time went up 100%.
Right.
We sold the property, we got out, I put that down, I still got a profit, so it was still a good deal.
Yeah.
I didn't make as much as I could have if I'd done something else. But to me, the great learning is my biggest mistake was still a profit.
Yeah.
And it stopped me from doing the house and land package. Not that I think that you can't make money from that, but it wasn't my strategy. I think you try 5% here, 5% there to try different things to make sure that you're not missing out on a massive opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So gamble a bit with a bit of your money, but then go back to your core. And if your core's right, then that's the way to go. And we're doing a similar thing now. So the majority of my wealth is all long-term buy and hold it for 50 years type thing.
Yep.
We've now just started getting into property options. So I got a bunch of clients that all put in 50 grand each, so we raised $1 million. I'm now investing in property options to option up like $1 billion worth of property.
Wow.
So we'll go to a block that has got maybe 50 units on there, buy it under an option, and then we can maybe create 500 units.
Wow.
It's massive, and there's no leverage, there's no personal debt or anything like that. But you could lose all your money.
Yeah.
But if you're only putting 50 grand in, and that 50 grand's getting diversified across 5 different projects, you've got like 10 bets at 10 grand, and if one comes up, the leverage is like turns a great. Then if you've made $1 million, to reinvest 50 is no big deal.
Yeah, great.
And that's the kind of thing. So reinvest part of your profits every year into education, into advisors, and into trying something a bit different to constantly educate yourself.
Love it. And mate, just on a personal note, I mean, you drive some beautiful sports cars. I've been quite critical of clients that maybe finance vehicles. I call them financing liabilities as opposed to income producing assets, which are property, mate. But on a more personal note, properties has helped you fund, I guess, more lifestyle choices as well.
Yeah. So my
beautiful
biggest
cars
motivator,
and a lifestyle.
Yeah. So my biggest motivator in life is lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I don't want to work for a living. I don't care what the dollar value is that I've got. I want to go and have fun.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky to retire from full-time work.
Excellent.
So I've almost had 20 years of fun. Sure, I do. I enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
But what my thought on the car thing was, like, I got trying to salary sacrifice at a big Ferrari convertible, and it was 250 grand, and they worked out the FBT tax on it was more than my wages, and they couldn't work out why such a junior person in the office could afford a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I said, it's just for like playing around at the weekends, and the partner's only $1 million couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I earned 80 grand. How could I do it? But my thought is that 250 grand I could have paid cash, but instead of paying cash for it, I got a lease on it, because I then used that 250 to buy $1 million worth of property.
Right.
If that $1 million worth of property then made 50 or 100 grand a year, i.e. 5 or 10%, that then pays for the car.
Love it.
So you can have your cake and eat it. Now, the last purchase I've made was 7 years ago. I bought a 2005 Lamborghini Murcielago, which is out there.
Yes.
Bright orange, and then we turned it purple. And I've done something like 45,000 Ks in it. It's up for sale now, 7 years later. Within a week of putting it on the carsales.com, I got offered 250 grand.
Right.
So it's almost like having a free Lambo for 7 years, 45,000 Ks, which is ridiculous mileage for something like that.
Yeah.
And now and this is a down market. So the insurance company even insured it for $350 within a year of me buying it.
Incredible. Look, I'm not sitting here advocating someone goes out and buys a Lambo as a financial vehicle, but it's
if there's a will, there's a way.
Correct, mate. There is an upside to it as well. Mate, Chris, you've been great. Thank you very much for sharing your
right.
knowledge, your insights. We're incredibly lucky to have you on the show, mate. You will find Chris's details in the show notes below. Chris runs Your Empire, so you can search them online. Thank you very much. If you've loved the show, we'd love for you to leave us a review on iTunes. Feel free to share it with your friends and family. Thanks very much again, Chris. Until next time. Thank you.